This is Martin Giles of the Guildford Dragon News, and today I'm with Fiona Davidson, who recently stood as a Residents for Guildford and Villages candidate in Friary and St Nicholas ward, and she has concerns about the future of doctors' surgeries in Guildford. Thank you, Fiona, for giving your time today to talk to the Guildford Dragon, and you have concerns about a consultation that's affecting the future of doctors' surgeries in Guildford.
I do. In the middle of August, I was sent a text by my surgery, which is part of the Gildines practice, saying that there was a consultation about the future of the practice on the 3rd of September at Emmanuel Church, and so I went along.
And what happened at that meeting?
We were basically told that both Woodbridge Hill Surgery and the Gildines sites were no longer appropriate to meet the needs of GPs in the 21st century, and that the idea was that the CCG was planning...
CCG?
Clinical Commissioning Group,
Yeah.
which is actually has a statutory responsibility for providing GP and other services to patients in Guildford. The CCG had looked at options, and of those options, the two most favoured options seemed to be either to build a new surgery at Pont Meadow School, which is on the fringe of Park Barn near the Royal Surrey, or at the Jarvis Centre, which is in Stoughton. So the idea is that they would develop a new site for both practices at either one or at both of those sites.
So that's a reduction of 5 to 2 or 1?
It is. There are 5 sites. So Gildines has 4 sites and Woodbridge Hill has 1 site.
Okay. And what were the concerns raised about such a proposal?
Well, I was concerned because the slides made a lot of mention, and this was also discussed as part of the presentation, of the 4 wards that were affected. So this was a consultation for North Guildford. And the 4 wards that were affected were Westborough, Stoughton, Stoke and Onslow. But actually, one of the bigger sites of the Gildines practice is in Friary and St Nicholas in Woodland Avenue. I mentioned this omission and it seemed to take the presenters by surprise. They didn't seem to have heard of Friary and St Nicholas, and I was surprised given that they made mention of the other wards, and of course a lot of people who attend the Gildines site in Woodland Avenue live in Friary and St Nicholas.
And of course that's where you've recently stood as a candidate, so you're familiar with that ward in particular, and you live there yourself?
I do, and I know the ward in great graphic detail, trust me. Okay,
and so are you worried then about the level of consultation that's taking place?
I was worried that the presenters seemed surprised or had been given new information. Now, I don't know whether that was or wasn't the case, but they seemed surprised and they said they would write it down. But actually, I became more concerned whenever we talked about the potential accessibility issues with the 2 sites that I think were most favoured. And of course, if you don't live in Guildford, I wonder if you really understand how difficult it is to get around the periphery. So all of the public transport, the buses, which most people would use if they didn't have access to a car, come into the centre. And it's actually it'd be very difficult if you lived in Stoughton to get to Pont Meadow. It'd be very difficult if you live in Friary and St Nicholas to actually get to Stoughton.
Especially when everyone is trying to tackle the traffic congestion in Guildford.
Exactly, and one of the issues cited for actually building a new centre is actually because some of the doctors at the surgeries affected feel that they're spending a lot of time on the road. And I have to admit, with these 2 potential sites, I suspect they're likely to spend more time on the road.
But thinking about it from the doctor's point of view, you can understand that they hope by centralising the services, they can provide more services, perhaps relieve some pressure on the hospital by carrying out more procedures in such a place. Mm-hmm. So can you see the other side of the argument?
Oh, Absolutely. I mean, I absolutely understand why the doctors would want new premises. Absolutely understandable. And also, one of the items that was raised was the fact that in order to deal with the shortage of GPs, and it's a national shortage, the intent is to actually provide more service through ancillary clinical personnel. And of course, all of these different specialities need space. So having a new centre, I think is, or a couple of new centres, I think is excellent. But the CCG is obviously concerned to provide new facilities. What I'm concerned about is that because they have a statutory responsibility, that actually their desire for a new centre may override the accessibility issues when it comes to making a decision.
And common sense might say that such a centre should be based in the town centre where the communication problems would not be so great. And, you know, it is a centre for bus routes and railway routes, for instance.
Absolutely. The issue, of course, with the town centre is, and this it's an issue throughout the whole of the borough, is that there are very few D1 sites. So those are sites that can be used by medical professionals. And I'm not sure there are actually any sites that meet the NHS's stringent criteria within the centre of Guildford. Now, could one be built meeting those criteria, given the number of brownfield sites in the centre of Guildford? Possibly. But I don't know if any of them have been considered.
And did they explain how the acquisition of a new site would be funded? Will it be funded from sale of the existing sites, for instance?
No, the existing sites are all owned by the GP partners.
Not by the NHS?
Not by the NHS, with the exception of the site at the University of Surrey,
right,
which I think is owned either by the university
right,
or by Guildford Borough Council.
And that would be one of the ones that goes?
And that would be one of the ones that goes,
okay,
as things currently stand.
Yes.
Absolutely. So the idea is that all of the effort would be put into one or two sites. The existing sites are, of course, liable to be sold by the GP partners who own them. But actually, all of those sites have D1 credentials, and actually on the basis that we really have an issue with D1 sites, they would be a very welcome addition to that inventory of D1 sites.
D1 was again?
D1 are those sites which are deemed appropriate for medical use,
right,
medical and sort of ancillary medical use.
Okay, so was it, were the next steps in this consultation spelt out at the meeting you went to?
Well, there was mention of a formal consultation, but what was interesting actually was that the roadmap that was actually presented at the end of the meeting showed no formal consultation. And that bothered me. I came away feeling that actually I understand that the CCG has a problem, and I sympathise with this problem. It needs to create new facilities to provide service to more people and to deal with the shortage of GPs. With GPs. There's no shortage of MPs.
Right.
Meanwhile, you have the population of the patients in Guildford who need these services. Well, the fact of the matter is that putting a building somewhere that meets the need of the CCG may not meet the needs of Guildford residents.
Yes.
And there is another point here. The meeting did not cover what was going to happen when the New Inn surgery closes, and I think that's happening in a few months' time, nor was there any mention of the closure of St Nicholas. Now, St Nicholas surgery is also in the town centre, actually in Friary and St Nicholas.
In Berryfields.
In Berryfields. So it feels as though this is a rather disjointed consultation, and that the options that are being considered, I think, are too narrow given the needs of residents.
Well, Fiona Davidson, thank you for coming and explaining your concerns, and we will continue to monitor and watch with interest.
Thank you.